What is up, everyone, and welcome to episode 33 of The Trainer Scoop, a podcast dedicated to helping individuals passionate about fitness improve in life and lifting. And today, I have the great pleasure of introducing to you my currently outfitted twin, if you're viewing this on YouTube, Alex Buga. Alex, say what's up to the people, my man.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me on, David.
Man, thank you for coming on. As I was talking to Alex right before we started recording, I think between him and Data Driven Strength, my man Craig, those are some of my favorite people from OSU. And this one like completes all of the people that I had really good conversations with throughout undergrad, people that I've kept up with since undergrad. It's been like 2 years now almost, man. So definitely excited to take this opportunity to kind of reconnect with you, see what's been up in your life, and talk about all the really cool things that you've been doing. So if you want to kick it off, Alex, tell everybody a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the intro. I definitely think it was a really good connection. So, um, from where we left off, I finished my master's degree. So, I successfully defended the thesis and the study we're going to discuss. So, I'm now going on to continue with a PhD, still
Ooh,
studying under Dr. Volek
nice.
and his team. So, yeah, it's a long academic career, but I mean, still kicking, still at OSU,
Mhm.
publishing good research, and still trying to figure out what's going on with ketogenic diets and carbohydrate restriction and different areas of training and military populations and diabetes and metabolic syndrome. So, yeah, the ever going process of peer review and hypothesis testing.
Yes, sir. So, real quick question for you, Alex. How common is it for someone to do undergrad, master's, and then continue on to do a PhD at the same institution? Is that a common thing or not?
I would say I've met people before that have done it.
Yeah.
However, the general recommendation is that you should explore other opportunities or work with as many people as you can or try to study under many advisors. But I just so happen to have opportunities of funding and continuous research where I almost got grandfathered in from undergrad to grad into PhD. And I just decided to stay on because there was always an interesting study that was following up and money was available, and passing on an opportunity where you sort of have your grad school paid off while you're still doing research, especially during these times.
Yeah.
I outweighed my options and I figure out I should stay. So definitely not as common, but I'm seeing it more and more often with people that I talk to. So
That's awesome. And I think, ultimately you really set yourself up to like, I mean, you said grandfathered in, but I would say, your hard work really paid off. So can you talk about, what exactly some of the things you did from undergrad to kind of like gain the maybe the confidence that they had in you to keep you on or to take you on as a master's student and then to keep you on continuing on forward.
yeah, absolutely. So I first of all reached out. It was a simple email, and I knew who I wanted to work with or what I wanted to do, and it was something that bridged nutritional sciences with training. And at the time, there was a ongoing ROTC military study that was testing the differences between consuming a ketogenic diet versus a low fat diet over the course of weeks of training and continuous monitoring of the diet. So what happened was I was first part of a kitchen, and it was a metabolic kitchen that was in the basement of the Ohio Union. And I was just simply tasked from the very beginning, preparing all the meals and preparing all the food for, at the time, it was actually three studies. So it was a military study that I just talked about. There was a dairy study, and then there was a palm oil study. So this was a multi study facility where we were just cooking recipes from A to Z. I mean, we could be there for like 3 or 4 hours. And I banked on the idea that if I continuously show up, and continuously put in work and demonstrate that I'm interested, then hopefully somebody's gonna notice or put in a good word for me or expect a letter of rec. I just didn't expect that spending 3 years there is gonna end up in the letter of rec that is gonna put me in the same lab that I just worked in. So it was a pleasant surprise, but I mean, it was very, it was, it was very um, interesting or positive for me because I was able to have some sort of a security to go on and continue studying something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah. And man, I'm really happy for you that it all paid off, because when I say you're one of the hardest working dudes with a busy schedule, I mean, yeah, you are definitely up there out of the people that I knew that were always, I remember like just talking, and it would be super early. You'd be going in to help out at the lab. Uh, you know, I feel like maybe at times your sleep suffered because you had such a regimented but challenging schedule. But it pays off, and I'm really happy for you, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, as I was saying, Alex, one of the bright students that I had class with, particularly Dr. Beal's class, I think was maybe the only class we had together. But
Hmm.
one thing I feel like I always do, Alex, I like find the people that are like either hardworking, talented, or a combination of both, and I just kind of like start talking to them. And I mean, most of the time it probably comes off as annoying at first, whether it's at the gym, in class. But I find people like that, and I'm like, yeah, I want to surround myself with that. So like we used to study together, and going through, I'm trying to think all of the little like calculations that we did in Dr. Beal's class with like body composition, like determining macronutrient values. Honestly, that was one of my favorite undergrad classes. And what I'm going for here is, what's been some of the most enjoyable learning experiences for you throughout your education?
So I think I agree on Dr. Buell's and Dr. Kennel's class. That was actually my favorite undergrad class that wasn't even listed as an undergrad. It was listed as a
Yeah, that's
master's
right.
class.
Yeah, that's right.
It was a 5,000 level course. And if you remember, we were actually a blend of PhD and undergrad students.
Mhm.
And it was so weird because it felt so out of place, but it was such a great put together class, and the information in that one I still actually carry to this day. So
Yeah.
it's funny, you mentioned formulas, and we still have Excel sheets built in just the way that we were learning in Dr. Buell's class. And to answer your question about other classes per se, I would say the human nutrition department, at least from an undergrad perspective, was pretty well put together. And it's funny because that was my minor. My actual major was biology. So
Mm.
I wanted a solid background in biological sciences, especially biochemistry. I actually regret not taking more biochemistry classes because I deal with this on extensively on a daily basis. And so I would say Buell's class, the human nutrition one, biochemistry 4511, and then I would say the third one, I took a food science class, and it was so cool because we were actually practicing cooking in the same kitchen that I was working for 3 years. So
Oh
I knew
yeah.
where everything was.
Hey.
I knew how to operate everything. It felt like I was coming back home, and I'm just a little rusty, but I know where everything
Yeah.
is in this kitchen. And it was great because it taught me some food techniques that I was able to take into work and then merge it with what I do every day and be able to talk to other people about how to prepare their food and how to be creative with meal preparation, right? So
Yeah.
that doesn't look like the colloquial bland chicken and broccoli and rice. It could be something else.
Man, I was thinking that exact point. I was like, man,
Mhm.
doing all of the cooking in the metabolic kitchen for all those years, it must have really helped and behooved you in terms of your own just ability to make like good food and understand like ingredients that you can use to kind of like spice up the nutritious food. So I'm sure that was a cool experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really fun when you get to work with a lot of ingredients, and I know it might seem boring to follow a recipe, but just the attention to detail that you can put following a recipe. I still take recipes from 3 years of cooking in that kitchen, and sometimes I see the resemblance in things that I'm cooking at home because I was just so conditioned to cooking all those recipes. And it's just something that it's a very great skill to have, especially if you're in nutritional sciences.
Most definitely. And yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about like some of your favorite classes and stuff that you wish you would have continued on a little bit deeper with. I just want to put it out there. I think that I'm totally with you with Dr. Buell. And then we actually had I think they recently added it when we were seniors. It was second level exercise physiology course from Dr. Marish. But he had, of course, the whole squad come in with Dr. Volek and Dr. Kramer. And I think the test that I actually did best on was over a lot of Dr. Volek's stuff because he got in a little bit deeper than I had ever seen him cover lectures in the other courses that we took, like the one that we took together. And I think he made a couple other guest appearances here and there. But
Hmm.
I really liked the subject material he went over. I wish personally that I would have been able to take more like biomechanics and kind of like the human movement side of things because I had that like basic glorified personal trainer degree, health promotion, nutrition, and exercise science, which taught me a lot of great stuff for what I do. It honestly set me up perfectly. But yeah, maybe someday I'd like to go in and learn or just find resources to learn more about that. But yeah, it's definitely cool to reflect back and see where we're at now.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned Dr. Kramer, Marish, and Volek, and I mean Dr. Kramer is he's sitting on more than 500 publications about neurological sciences and the interplay between the nervous system and the endocrine system and strength training and strength adaptations. And I mean, his research is all very strength and conditioning driven, whereas Dr. Marish is more so on an expert in the cardiopulmonary um, part of exercise science. And then yeah, Dr. Volek, obviously you're gonna get a nutrition or 10 nutrition questions from him on an exam. So he's yeah, like despite doing carbohydrate restricted research, I think he every exam that I've ever taken from him talks about systems as a whole or the interplay of both macronutrients and micronutrients from a training perspective.
Right.
um, and yeah, I mean, you mentioned something about the PT or getting a certification after finishing school or graduating with something that adds another 2 or 3 letters after your name. And I think that's important, at least as a health professional or as a strength and conditioning professional, to add as many letters as you can because I am in the process of studying for the CSCS exam.
Nice.
So, I mean, right now, just to anybody that's listening, just having 1 or 2 degrees is actually putting you barely on the median. Like you're in an actual minority to just have a bachelor's degree. So it's not uncommon for people to just go and get an MBA, try to get a ACSM certification, try to get a CSCS certification. So wherever there's an opportunity to continue education, even if you don't go formally and sit in a classroom and take college credits, definitely is more attractive to receive an email or to put it as a resume item
Hmm.
that you have all these certifications because you now just made yourself more hireable and
Yeah.
more appealing to an audience that you're talking to. And you're not just some, I don't know, let's say keyboard warrior that just talks about topics that are cool.
Yeah. No, definitely. That's a great point. And something that like everybody, if they want to continue to advance themselves, not only from the perspective of getting hired and getting monetary gain, but also just the continued pursuit of knowledge. I 100% agree with that, man.
Yeah, can never be too educated. So that's definitely something that at least I was made aware of while being during my master's, because I actually recommend it to anybody who wants to take it. And just as a side comment, there's no reason to not do a master's program today where you would have to pay out of pocket. So if somebody wants to do it, especially, I would assume that the audience is more so driven towards exercise and nutrition. There are a lot of grants that are written in this field. So if you find the right advisor that you want to study for, just an email and setting up an in-person meeting can just leverage your position into getting into the lab versus somebody that just wants to have a meeting and they never hear from again.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of advisors across the US, especially in publicly funded institutions. So if you're interested in any topic, just go through PubMed or Google Scholar, find the one you want to study with, send an email, and then see if they write grants and write research, because they'll most likely fund your career to continue your education. If not, that's fine too. And like I said, going back to what I said earlier, get as many continuing degrees or continuing education units as you can, because you're making yourself more relatable to people, to clients, to participants, and it just brings this whole continuing education spectrum.
Yeah. That's really good advice, and I didn't even know that it was kind of like, I mean, maybe not the most readily available thing for everyone to expect for that to happen, but that is really cool that those systems exist for people that are passionate about contributing to research and furthering themselves. So that's really cool.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely.
And that also kind of transitions well into my next point. So partially out of me just wanting to catch up with you, man, but I think it'd also be interesting to hear any of the highlights that you had from your master's program. Obviously, we'll get into this beast of a study that you just successfully defended. But yeah, definitely interested to hear any other highlights that came along the way.
Yeah, it's so masters was probably the best thing I've ever done. And the fact that I was able to start as an undergrad and having known Dr. Volek and his team for 3 years before doing a master's program was a huge ace up my sleeve.
Mm,
So the I'll say some behind the scenes of the masters, because everybody can look up what the master's degree does, but the amount of flexibility that I have in a master's degree in terms of picking courses, schedule, fitting training as well, is something that you don't often read on the internet. So I had the luxury of picking whatever classes I wanted as long as I had the credits, but the classes had to be somewhat relevant. So this is directly from Dr. Volk. He would approve my classes as long as they had something to do with nutrition or exercise or anything that was offered in our department. I've even taken classes outside of our department, in like the animal science department, because it was cross-listed with the veterinary college. And that's where I took my macronutrients class for grad students.
mm,
This is where I'm currently taking my endocrinology class. So it is definitely, the master's program is definitely aimed to make you a very well-rounded and robust student, but it is so flexible to what I want to take. It's a complete night and day difference to the structure that an undergrad had. And you can relate to it, right? The GE part, the you have to take this biology class in order to graduate. There's no such thing in our department, at least. The second thing was the lab culture. So, again, from what I've been learning or observing over the 3 years that I was working as an undergrad, is that there's a lot of cohesion between lab members. Not only do you have to have the same sense of humor and you have to have the same attitude as a team player in the lab, but it is also the mentality of um, just plowing through when things get rough with having 3 or 4 studies piled up at once. you have to go in and help with the blood draw. You have to wake up at 3 a.m. because you have to set up for a participant that is showing up at 4 a.m. And then it's like a Vegas casino to a one point. You know, you wake up, there's no sun on the sky. You go down into a basement, you have no windows, and then you leave, and there's also no sun up on the sky. So it's like living in Alaska for 6 months, but concentrated in about 6 to 8 weeks, however long it takes to get that one participant through.
Hmm.
And so this embrace the suck was something that I didn't quite realize was expected, at least in the team that I was being a part of. But it made us definitely stronger compared to other masters teams that work in our department. So it's definitely something that I don't take for granted because we had a incredible team put together when I first started.
Hmm.
So, and I just wanted to be like them. They were, those masters and PhD students when I was just still a grunt were amused to me to try to emulate what they were doing and what they were learning. So, yeah, I mean, in the end, just to wrap it up, it's an incredible experience, and I recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, man, that flexibility part sounds so cool to me. And like you said, like contrasting that to undergrad, the summer before our senior year, I had some debacle where like I didn't have a course correctly because like for me, I had three different advisors in undergrad. So like things just yeah, like one left, one quit, and then the other one was like yeah, he kind of put in a bad situation because, that's just so many people.
Yeah.
And I realized like I never got signed up for one course that I needed to graduate and it wasn't being offered. And I was like, "Oh, great. This is awesome. I'm going to stay on an extra like semester for one class. Awesome." And
Wow.
and then trying to get a hold of Dr. Pitosa to like try to like write me a excuse or whatever. I love Dr. Pitosa, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure he's a extremely busy man, but that was a struggle. And just hearing that like there is light at the end of the tunnel for those who want to continue on with education to like really kind of, I mean, it sounds like you can, of course there's got to be some constraints, but to really explore what you want to explore and learn and
Hmm.
make
Hmm.
it apply towards your overarching goals, that's really cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I didn't know that either going in. And I, 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 I remember this one time when I was talking about flexibility, and then I'll tell you a downfall. But one of the positives, I remember we were doing an assay. We were measuring something for one of our studies, and one of the assay portions had this incubation period where it was like 2 to 3 hours. And what are you going to do 2 to 3 hours to kill time? Wear your gym shoes, go to the gym, get a good session in. And it was not uncommon that we would come back and start pipetting, all sweaty coming from the gym, and just because that's how our training schedule was routed. So it was so cool because we we were all this lab that was so hardcore on just lifting together. And very often, I mean, during the summer, when things would calm down, we would even have some two-a-days, right? Some conditioning in the morning, and then uh, strength in the afternoon. And it was super cool to do it with other grad students. I was just, like I said, they took me under their wings. So to show me these kinds of things has a lasting impact. But a negative, I would say, so the graduate school expects every graduate student to work about 20 hours a week. So to split it across 5 days, it's about a 4 hour requirement per day. That never happens. And I'll tell you why, because there'll be some, excuse me, there'll be some days where you would have almost 8 to 10 hours where you're just absolutely stuck into an analysis, and what are you going to do? Just a 2 day work week? You do your 20 and then you leave? No, you can't.
Yeah.
You're expected to have a meeting on Wednesday, and then you're expected on Thursday to hop on a conference call with a sponsor or a grant committee. And then on Friday, we kind of made meetings illegal on Friday. So everything that we do is Monday through Thursday. It's really like capital punishment in our lab to have any meetings on Friday. So that's what we get. It's like 4 10s, it's
Yeah.
like you work 4 days, 10 hours a day. And yeah, I mean, we um we just run into obstacles, and some weeks are 80-hour weeks and then some are 10. And but the flexibility is huge. Nobody tells me when I can or can't work out. I mean, there'll be some days where you're completely slammed, but to have the luxury of you walk in the office at 9, start working until noon, eat whenever you want, and you go train, and then you come back and you continue your work. It's it's both structured and non-structured, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got you. And I feel like that brings up a point that I, for some reason, I feel stupid. I had the oversight of not planning is your training, man, because I always would see you at the RPAC throughout undergrad. Even when I like wasn't really introduced to you, I would see you pretty consistently. So talk about that a little bit, man, because I'm interested to see what you're doing now with your training. I know in the past you kind of did like a combination of like hypertrophy and strength training, but definitely interested to see what you're up to now and kind of how that like plays into your overall schedule and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember freshman or sophomore year, somebody gave me a PDF of Wendler's 531, and I stuck to that program for almost a year. So you can call it a macro cycle. And it's not that I couldn't have adhered to the program, but I just wanted some variation. And then what happened was I got into Renaissance, and I know we kind of talked about it before. And I went to the RPAC, so obviously a gym with more equipment than the gym that we had on South Campus. So I mean, I had the freedom of just doing everything and following the program to a T. I got to learn a lot of cool things about what an undulating periodization is, how to structure volume and tonnage, and how to calculate those things to track progress over time. I still have the Excel sheets from way back when in undergrad, and I think it was a. I think I could thank my younger self for following something structured than just jumping into the gym and doing what I saw was cool on YouTube and Instagram, I guess. Instagram wasn't as smart back then, so I don't know. It really depended on what I was following. But I follow a lot of great people over the years, and the program that I got most vested into was the muscle and strength pyramids. It was co-written by Helms and Valdez, and um, Andy from AndyRipBody.com wrote a whole nutrition part on it. So it was a really cool and well put together book where I've just used every single tip and trick that came from Wendler and RP, and then I jumped into muscle and strength pyramids. And I love that book because it was tailored to somebody that could also study for the CSCS exam, because Helms has a background in training, and his dissertation was all on RPE training and how to gauge your efforts and strength train without the guidance of 1 RMs per se.
What year was that,
So
do you think? That
come
he,
again.
what year do you think he did that?
Oh, what year?
Like early 2010s, late 2000s?
Yeah, no, I what year he did his dissertation or
Yeah,
published his
yeah.
book?
Because I feel like that would, I think that stuff just wasn't as common back then. That's really cool to.
Yeah, I would say I would say it's probably in this millennia. I could be
Right,
wrong.
right.
I hope he sends me a DM if I'm wrong.
He's
But
like,
I
Alex, you dumb.
no, I can't remember. I know what his dissertation is about,
Yeah.
because he was actually on a paper with Mike Zerdos and Dr. Foth in our department.
Oh, yeah.
They wrote an entire exercise oncology paper, which was
Right.
published, I think, around 2007. So I'm guessing that
Oh, yeah.
anytime anytime before that, he must have had his dissertation. But my point is, the book is pretty awesome. I mean, I've learned some tips and tricks in there that I still carry forward. So that's kind of where I remained on the training structure and programming. And then our lab culture also had this sort of idea that you could do something that was more so listed on the CrossFit page, or we would try to match the numbers of the open and see how, just because it was a great standard to brag about, it was all in relative terms. So this is my time, this is how much I snatched, this is how much I ran on an or pedaled on an erg bike.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just something that we've run through a whole gamut of training. But I would say those three programs that I mentioned definitely shaped my knowledge the way that I have it today.
Yeah. That's funny, man, because I want to get into this real quick. This was like
Mhm.
us at the beginning of undergrad, right? And then it was like you took this route, the high route. For those of you who are listening to this, you probably aren't going to get the analogy that I made. But there was a diverging path, and Alex chose the path of knowledge. I chose the path of Instagram. So I want to tell you, while Alex, he had a great base, 531, into some intelligent, calculating volume, tonnage, stuff that, you can objectively track your progress. This is what I did at undergrad. So I started off, Candido's 6-week, pretty solid strength program, has its still pretty good program. Got a lot of accolades back in the day. Then I fell victim to the Instagram. And Alex, you'll get a kick out of this combination. So so no offense to this dude, because I've kind of shat on him before in the podcast. Overall, a
Mhm.
great guy, but this program was squatting every day to a max, right? So you'd squat,
Sounds pretty sound.
yeah, but it was conjugate, right? Because some days you do high bar, some days you do low bar, some days you do through bands, some days you do front squat, but you were still squatting to a max every day. And it got to the peak of one summer. I had a couple online classes, but I stayed in Columbus, and I was like, I'm gonna go train with them. They trained at 4 a.m. So I get up at 3, and they had this diet called anabolic fasting, right? Think about that for a second.
No, yeah, I'll let you finish because I got a great story about that one.
Yeah. So we trained like some of the best. I mean, if we would have removed the squats, that would have been some of the best training I had. Like the fact that at 4 a.m. it was that lit and the environment was that awesome. I still look back on it. I'm like, that was lightning in a bottle. But then you wouldn't eat until noon. So you're literally going 6 hours until eating. And on top of that, you wouldn't eat carbs until almost bedtime at like 8 or 9. So it was just a fuck ton of, excuse me, a lot of vegetables and protein. I would usually do like 80-20 ground beef or chicken thighs. And then I would do that for like 2 or 3 meals, just like eat till however much till you're full. I would slam food. And
Hmm.
then before bed, you would either eat like a big sweet potato and peanut butter, or like bananas and peanut butter. And of course, you were sipping branched chain amino acids throughout the day just to cap it off.
Man, you listed like five things that triggered the light bulbs in here. It's like a car going on with engine failure, with
Right?
brakes missing downhill.
Dude.
And I, yeah, I mean, I don't even know what point of concern I should address first, because
All of them.
there's there's this. I'm surprised. Did you ever? I'm surprised you didn't get hospitalized for a rhabdo from just squatting like that and completely depleted.
I don't know, man. Like I think about it a lot, and the rhabdo thing never really comes to my mind, because I think a lot of people, while you're like straining as much, I think also like intensity might not have been there in other parts of training, like just because like you were so gassed after your squats. That's the only
Hmm.
thing that I can
Okay.
think of would. And what's funny, Alex, I was shredded. Like I maybe arguably looked the best I ever have at the end of that summer. Like it was like I was in such good shape.
Yeah, it must have been the BCAAs, right?
Yeah, no, the BCAAs, and then the 450 milligrams of caffeine pretty much the sole ingredient of that pre-workout. So
Man, what was it? The original Jack 3D formula that killed people?
practically, man,
Man,
practically.
I still miss that. But anyway, that's besides the point. No, I was, man, 450 milligrams just in one take, just straight to the dome, one take.
One
Man,
take, and then 10 minutes later, you're shitting it out.
yeah. And you're having anxiety for the next 5 hours, contemplating the world collapsing on you. No, I would say these programs that are put together that might not have some sort of an e- evidence-based backing. I mean, we're getting into a range or this trend where everything almost has to have a citation attached to it.
Yeah.
And while there's some while there's some coaches or trainers that have a lot of experience teaching or coaching athletes or putting successful athletes uh, through competitions, whether it's bodybuilding or powerlifting competitions, I think it's still important to have a good base that is rooted in evidence based advice. So, I mean, you had results. You're a poster boy for that program,
Yeah.
right? So the knee jerk impulse is saying, well, David looks shredded and he looks really great, but it's kind of like a NASCAR. And it's the shell that looks all cool with stickers, but underneath, is this skeleton car that has just blown three valves and the engine is falling apart.
Yeah.
So,
That's a
so
good
I,
analogy.
so the thing is, poster boys or poster gals can eclipse the entire evidence-based community because there's the fallacy of the famous person that is boasting the program or the supplement or insert name here. So for example, strictly going back to your story, right? There's X amount week program, you do this amount of squats, PubMed doesn't matter, there's nothing else. Just trust me, bro. And that works with a lot of people. I mean, I've met a handful of people or more handfuls of people that just follow some program that hasn't been tested in uh, a formal setting or a concept hasn't been tested in a research setting. And to an extent, that's fine if their enjoyment is high. I don't want to crush their dreams if they're doing something and they see results and they enjoy doing it. But if there's an injury around the corner, if there is a downfall on the way that that program is suggesting how you should manipulate your nutrition, your hydration, your fatigue, your sleep, that just that's just problematic, and it's only going to snowball into more problems later in life, even just from doing a poor program that can lead to this debilitating injury. And squats are arguably the only powerlifting exercise that can absolutely crush you from top to bottom. Like bench will just probably crush your sternum or your neck. And then a deadlift, if you drop it, the worst that can happen is just pass out. But a squat actually folds you in half. And let's say you can always rely on the catches. But to put yourself through a program like that while also being fasted, while also being probably sleep deprived because 4 a.m., that would require you to go to bed at 8 p.m. to just get 8 hours of sleep. Let's say 7 to 8 would be commonly accepted that you don't run into those problems that are reported in some of the sleep literature where it has an impact on your long-term muscle mass retention. So there was a study comparing 8 hours versus 5 hours of sleep, and it shows that being sleep restricted does have a negative impact on your lean body mass. So if you were trying to do a program where you're trying to accrue a significant amount of muscle while doing it when your tank is completely empty and you have very little sleep under your belt, it's it's virtually impossible. I mean,
Yeah.
you can push through it, but I would say that the adherence is very poor. So, I mean, you're not doing it today, right?
No, I don't know.
So
No.
it stopped in college years, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And Yeah, and then the training part is one. Like there's more, I would say there's less opinions on the training component of a program. But when you get onto the nutrition side or you flip to the nutrition chapter, it is a war zone. I mean, it is, you will get torn apart if you make a claim, and the bolder that the claim sounds, the less it is rooted in reality. In other words, if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, the you just mentioned eat your carbs late at night, already debunked several times because there doesn't seem to be a difference whether you front load them, back load them, or you spread them throughout the day when you account for the total amount of energy, right? BCAAs, recent study just been published. BCAAs don't really do anything in the grand scheme of things besides just flavoring your water in some weird way and market it as something that increases muscle or supports muscle growth. It's the way I tell people about BCAAs is like a train, but just a locomotive, because everybody talks about leucine and like leucine spiking and acting as a muscle protein synthesis initiator. Well, you have the initiator, like you have the spark, that's a locomotive. But if you eat a protein source that contains the same amount of leucine, but the other 19 amino acids are there too, you're having all the locomotives, right? You're
Mhm.
now carrying yourself into muscle protein synthesis fully. You're not committed to just the spark, leucine, isoleucine, valine, and other things that are in just a powder, because that's a blip of muscle protein synthesis.
Mhm.
There's no area under the curve that they stimulate enough that you can confidently say that you are now committed for the next 2 or 3 hours in a muscle protein synthesis state. And it's very hard to take a BCAA and actually expect it to offset the muscle protein breakdown. Like it might be a great reminder if you put some BCAAs in water and they have a flavor because it will remind you to drink. And maybe it's going to offset some of the hydration issues that you're running into at the gym, right? I mean, but that's something that any flavor water can do.
Yeah.
So it brings into question what's the efficacy of BCAAs, and based on the research that's been coming out in the past 5 years, there doesn't seem to be a very efficacious supplement.
Yeah.
So,
So when you become Dr. Alex Buga, do you
mhm.
plan on teaching? Because that was really good, man. Like
Nah,
that was really good.
I no, I appreciate it. I'm just trying to be as objective as I can. I
Mhm.
it's dialogue like this. It's just the way that I talk to you or the way I talk to people. I'm not shy of addressing a class of 100 people the way that we're talking right now. So
Mhm.
it's just sharing knowledge. So, and discussing ideas. So I mean, I've never heard of this study until you brought it up. So it'd be a great conversation that I can tell other people in the future if I talk to them. So yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing. That's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, man. I think you did a really good job of going through and kind of like explaining each concept of that, and then
Mhm.
and offering your 2 cents. You do a really good job of like making it understandable as well, and using those like analogies, like the locomotive and like the NASCAR or whatever car you
Mhm.
said.
Yeah, you got it.
But
You got it.
I'd say most importantly, you have the accent too, which 100% means students would listen to you. So all I'm saying is, man, I think you could get Apple Educator of the Year. Move over, Dr. Foos. The future Dr. Buga is coming for your throne.
Yeah, then the chemistry department there. No, yeah. I,
Yeah.
most I've ever taught was I remember Dr. Marish left um, or could not attend one of his classes, and it was a really cool opportunity to guest lecture about how to how to be successful in grad school and what what the components are of grant writing and
Yeah.
giving advice from just what it meant to be a component of multi-site studies and teams of 20 or 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
So I lectured in front of about 120 people, and my previous PR was like a classroom of 5 or 10 people. So to actually sit on a stage and talk about it just made me realize that if I treat everybody in a discussion the way that we're having the podcast right now, and how I'm talking to people in a 5 to 10 person classroom or a giant amphitheater or auditorium, it's just it's just the way to go. I mean, this just going into public speech advice. It's nothing to really be afraid of if you're up to date on literature
Mm-hmm.
and you're keeping up with what is being published. You can spark a really cool conversation. So I still keep up with people from that 100 person class that I've taught in. So,
Yeah.
which is really cool. I mean, I still think it's teaching is a pretty great experience.
100%. And man, I don't know if we're gonna be able to match that PR with this podcast because typically my analytics say I get like 50 to 70 views on average or downloads. So
Hmm.
I mean, maybe someday we'll both get famous, and then that'll like multiply tenfold. But
Hmm.
hey, 120, that's nothing to cough at. That's cool, man.
50 to 70, I think that's a pretty good metric. I mean, how many podcasts are there on Apple Podcasts?
Yeah, this one's episode 33, so it's picked up steam pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, that's huge though. I mean, it's if you listen to one a day, that's a month worth of podcasts.
I know
And
it's weird to think about it like that, right?
no, but it's a great thing to take. I mean, the way I look at it, you could have had zero if you
Yeah.
had no opportunity to or no incentive to do something like this. So,
Hmm.
like I said, I'm not exaggerating saying that I came across your channel just because of how Instagram was getting smarter and the recommendation algorithm. So the fact that this just happened, it just increases your ceiling
Yeah.
of reachable audience, whether following you on Instagram and it could be on iTunes podcast. So, I mean, if you need some metrics up, I can just sit every day and hit download 100 times, and we'll pump those metrics up.
There we go. There we go. Make a make one of the lab assistants just download all of them.
I
100.
need you to make 100 bot accounts. Don't ask me what's for, okay? It's just homework.
It's just
This is part of your grade. Everybody just go on your iTunes and hit the download button 5 times.
oh my god.
Gonna
That'd be
wake up
awesome.
to 10,000 views overnight and just it's like, dude, I don't know what happened. It
That's
it just took
hilarious.
off.
Oh shoot. Hey, you're giving me ideas.
Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out this episode of the Trainer Scoop podcast. I just wanted to let you know I offer a free week of online coaching to anyone that would like to take a strategic approach to training and nutrition. So within this free week of coaching, you'll get a consultation call, personalized calorie and macronutrient values, and of course, your own personalized training program. So if you or anyone you know would like to take advantage of this offer, feel free to just shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook, or just follow that link in the description of the podcast and it'll take you right to it. Thank you so much, and back to the show.
But I want to talk about perhaps the pinnacle of your graduate degree experience.
Mhm.
The experiment that I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, you pretty much designed and oversaw this. Is that accurate?
I would say my component is more so running and executing the study
Gotcha.
in
Okay.
the trenches. So
Gotcha.
the grant was written by Dr. Volek, and it is his project, and it was
Okay.
funded by a company in California called Metagenics, who
Yeah.
provided the supplement
Mm.
and provided all the funds to run the study. So I hope that
Yeah. Yeah.
clarifies. Yeah.
Yeah. So to preface this for the audience, I'll just read off what the study is called. So we have the effects of a 6-week controlled hypocaloric ketogenic diet with and without exogenous ketone salts on body composition responses. So what I did last night and finished up a little bit of research this morning is I was like, okay, so obviously there's got to be some issue with these kind of like exogenous ketone salts, these supplements that are sold. They might be making some claims that just don't quite add up. So what I did was I I was like, yeah, like most supplements, as we've already talked about, BCAAs, like there's got to be some BS going on in the industry. So I Googled these like ketone salts and I found a couple different things. So the first one I found was it was a product called Tiger's Blood. Like, holy shit, Tiger's Blood. If I'm drinking Tiger's Blood, I gotta be making some gains. That one's by it was like Ketoned Advanced was that company. And it was
Okay.
saying some pretty out there claims, such as you could get the fat burning benefits of a ketogenic diet while not being on a ketogenic diet. And I was like, all right, this is why this shit was designed. Like, that makes sense. So bold claims, and then you do get like some more reasonable claims. Like bulk supplements that just sells like a lot of the raw ingredients. They had a more kind of like realistic claim in that they said it helps support healthy hair and skin and may support healthy metabolic function. Ketone supplements may aid in maintaining healthy weight in already healthy individuals when used in conjunction with a healthy diet and exercise. So I felt like that was a more fair, like less just absolute reach of a statement. Um, and I can see how the obvious need for this study came about because you need to see if these claims aren't just complete BS. But man, as I read through this study, and I promise I wasn't an abstract warrior on this one. Sometimes I do that. It happens. I'm guilty, but just the absolute thoroughness that man, as kind of like the overseer, I'm guessing you had a lot on your plate, man. Like I was very, very blown away by just how many different details you observed. And I'm interested to hear like what was the time frame from like beginning to close of that, because we can
hmm
get into all those different details, but I'm just interested to hear that first and foremost.
Yeah, I was gonna say the Tiger Blood ketones. If I'm not Charlie Sheen by the time I'm down with my first dose, it's fake advertising. I'm suing. I'm holding them accountable. But no, besides the point. Now that you
Charlie.
get into the main question, yeah, it was a multi-student project. So the actual overseer, the lab mom, was Madison. She's the co-author on the paper, and I would say that I would say that we're actually two primary authors on that paper.
Yeah.
I just had the initiative because I was curious, and I really wanted to publish something regarding body comp and
Mm.
like you mentioned with this whole ketone salt boom, the timing was just right, and I don't think we could have nailed the timing at a better point during the year or during previous years, because we absolutely nailed the publication of the study with these ketone salt challenges, ketone salt claims, companies coming out making making some, like you mentioned, bold claims or something that's not really rooted in evidence. And while some try to cover for their tail, like you mentioned with bulk supplements, there are others that have absolutely no reservation. And they go in there and they try to make the boldest clickbaity title that will just sell, sell, sell out the door. And I think it's just not good practice. And we have a duty as fair scientists to publish and test a hypothesis and publish the results no matter what the outcome. And so this whole study was an exploratory study. The goal was to see what would it take, or what changes would we expect if there's a ketogenic diet group that's undergoing weight loss versus a ketogenic diet group that's undergoing weight loss that takes ketone supplements twice a day, one time in the morning and one time in the afternoon, full dose, right? So we collected over 6 weeks about more than 150 variables. I mean, it was from blood markers, it was body composition, it was MRI, muscle and liver fat analysis. We had inflammatory panels, lipid panels. I mean, we're expecting another 5 or 6 publications just out of the study alone.
Nice.
So I I was able to, uh, lead this paper, and like I said, it was a very large group effort. And then Chris, one of the other co-authors on the paper, he spearheaded the results from these ketogenic diets with or without ketone salts on liver fat outcomes. And he got published too. It's in the MDPI journal, Nutrients, also published this month actually. And I would say it was a very cool study. It lasted 9 months. We ran 37 people through. We randomized the ketogenic diet groups, and then we added a low fat arm at the end to serve as a comparison, because I thought it was only fair
Yeah.
to do it for the sake of publication and transparency. And I'm glad we did it, because this is the whole, PubMed rave on the internet right now on the ketone salt science, or
Mm.
in keto and carbohydrate restriction. So no, it was a very cool study, and I'm glad that I was able to be part of this project, because it is it is very trendy, if you want to say it right now. And
Yeah.
to have a peer review that debunks probably hundreds of claims from dozens of different sources, it's just this satisfaction that I have, because we were able to be one of the first ones to demonstrate it in a weight loss setting, and very tightly controlled.
Mm.
We measured every food item to the nearest zero point 0.1 of a gram.
Yeah.
You can't get tighter than that.
Yeah.
That is an absolute metabolic feeding, where people actually got to take the food home too. And so it was a very detailed study. So
Man, and like I feel like you're not even giving yourself enough credit, man, because there was DEXA, there was REE, RER, MRI, like so much. I was just like, man, the thoroughness, it really did blow me away. I will say the one part that I took issue with, Alex,
mhm,
is after, right? After the, I want to say the testing, it might have been,
mhm,
you might have to correct me on this.
mhm.
You collected urine for 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
In a 3.4 liter container.
Mhm,
I would say, you know what, a liter is like what, like 34 ounces, something like that. I would
mhm.
probably need like at least a 10-gallon container
Drum.
just to make sure my no, I'm fucking around. I
10
saw that. I
gallon.
was like,
Yeah, we had a participant. Uh, Obviously, it's a. I'm not gonna list any names or
yeah.
any details. I don't want to get sued by HIPAA, or IRB. But we had a we. It wasn't uncommon to have participants to leave with about 2 of those containers, but we just had participants where we were very thorough about it. I'm saying for the next 24 hours, you best be closing your lid on your toilet and void all the urine there, because we need to accurately measure your urinary nitrogen data.
Yeah.
And um, this one participant took it so serious, and he was so stressed out, because I sent him home with 2 containers, and he came back with them filled to the brim. Like, if the wind was blowing, I would have had a little pool party in the lab there while putting a pipette in and trying to get samples out. It's like, wow, this is dedication. You just became my favorite participant. Next
Oh
time
yeah.
you get 3 containers.
Dude, that's awesome. That's so funny just to hear like those little like details about that. I love it.
Yeah, it was funny. Behind the scenes, I got hundreds of stories behind the scenes with that study. So
I
I
can
know
imagine.
black and white writing and peer review is not always that interesting. So
Right.
anything that I can help you with, or questions that you have about it, just fire away.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that you said earlier about kind of like the trendiness and catching it in the right time, it's been cool to see how perceptions and just thoughts of like the ketogenic diet in general have maybe shifted a little bit because like do you remember probably when we first started undergrad That's when I started hearing a lot about keto. And then like everyone in our nutrition, well, in my nutrition classes, I didn't really have a lot with you, but like I'm sure you had the same experience. Like there was those like anti-keto zealots. And don't get me wrong, I don't think keto is great for everyone. For everyone, it's great for some people. But they were like, keto is the worst thing, like up on their soapbox. And I'm just like, shut the fuck up. Like, yes, we all know that it's not practical for everyone. And then I feel like as time went on, as certain individuals even heard from Dr. Volek in these actual guest lectures, it was like, okay, I can see the purpose of keto, what populations it might serve, what benefits and how it might behoove things like ultra endurance athletes in general, maybe. So then there was kind of like a shift more like, oh, maybe keto is not the worst thing in the world. Maybe it's just like a tool to use. And then, yeah, like you said, you have these supplements that, of course, people see these trends and they're like, how can we make money off of this? Let's create a supplement with some claims on it. So to kind of get into the weeds with some other things that I noted, it was interesting that, you know, these supplements, they say they enhance and increase the beta hydroxybutyrate, which, you know, just naturally happens in a ketogenic diet. I was interested to see that I noted this a little bit further down. So one thing, correct me if I'm wrong, I wrote down that the low fat diet and the ketogenic diet with the ketone salts had less nitrogen excretion. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, the low fat diet reported the least overall, or
Yeah,
the
yeah.
trend was actually opposite a week two, because there's this weird adaptation or catch up phase
Okay.
when there's a true onset of beta hydroxybutyrate
Yeah.
that may act as a nitrogen sparing agent. So the reason that we were able to, and it's been reported in the literature before, like there have been several papers published in the 80s by Stephen Finney, where they show that nitrogen balance kind of reads funky or between week one and week two when somebody goes from a mixed diet onto a ketogenic diet. And it tends to correct itself once the beta hydroxybutyrate levels are maintained.
Yeah.
But that's a condition, right? And we saw that there was a reduction in total nitrogen excretion with the inclusion of the ketone salt. So just exposure from day one, um, we reported to have seen like this 8% reduction in nitrogen excretion compared to a ketogenic diet with a placebo alone. But that effect was not robust enough to show a between group difference. But the low fat diet was overall significantly lower in nitrogen excretion compared to the ketogenic diet with a placebo. So that kind of shows that you're splitting the middle ground by taking these ketone salts. If you look at nitrogen alone,
Yeah.
well, let's step back and take a 10,000-foot view. This didn't have a significant impact on lean body mass.
Okay.
Everybody lost lean body mass I would say, if total lean body mass loss was equal at the end of the intervention. It was about 2 kilograms, right? It's roughly 4.4 pounds of lean body mass detected by DEXA. Now, what was interesting though is that 77% of that total lean body mass loss just happened in the first 2 weeks. The other 23% that happened week two, week four, and week six did not significantly change compared to that week two endpoint. It like plateaued for the ketogenic diets. The low fat diet was more so consistent between the weeks. Like they consistently lost lean body mass until week six. But I'm not going to get into the weeds of the detection between like DEXA and MRI, but just something that many people might not know. And if somebody's interested, using the DEXA for body composition, is that total body water is detected as lean mass
Yeah.
on a DEXA.
Yeah.
So to have something that even reduces your intramuscular glycogen stores.
That was my next question.
Go ahead, ask it.
Yeah, that's like I was gonna ask about the kind of like the same phenomena you talk about within the first 2 weeks. You see that loss of lean mass, and then like I was also gonna say, like I think you mentioned it somewhere, but it just occurred to me as I was reading the study, like, oh, you're probably getting that glycogen depletion within that time frame as well as you kind of even out with the adaptation to the beta hydroxybutyrate. The glycogen's probably kind of lowering as that's
Yeah, and well, so primarily it's driven because a requirement to produce beta hydroxybutyrate is obviously increased rates of endogenous lipolysis, right? So in
Mm-hmm.
order to do this, in other words, to facilitate this, you have to reduce your circulating concentrations of insulin. That is just a physiological and biochemical sound requirement to facilitate BHP production, right?
Yeah.
The point is that, I mean, insulin is a very robust hormone that participates in glycogen synthesis. So that acute onset of reduction in insulin concentrations in the ketogenic diet context is obviously going to have some impact on total glycogen stores. And so this, just to mention, because this is very specific, this is an untrained population. We're talking about overweight and obese participants that have a physical activity level of about 1.3. If anybody knows anything about physical activity levels, 1.2 is pretty much sedentary. I mean, completely sedentary. The highest I got was 1.55, which was some people that were doing some light running or light um, aerobic classes, but nothing formal, like we talked early in the podcast. And so, in an untrained population, you'd expect that glycogen stores are around 350, 400 grams. That threshold can obviously increase to almost 500 based on the individual and your training status. But that accounts for a lot of water by association with glycogen, because glycogen has an osmolyte effect, right? 1 gram of glycogen is
Yeah.
associated with 3 grams of water.
Yeah.
And this is not something new that we reported. It's just something that we had to make evident, because when you're comparing a ketogenic diet or a low carbohydrate diet to a low fat diet, the instrumentation that you use to measure lean body mass has to be viewed with the understanding that there could be some fluid shift that could exacerbate the rate of lean body mass that you're detecting from baseline to week 2. In
Yep.
other words, it might look like you're losing more muscle than what you actually are. And this is not something to, I'm not here to trash the DEXA or talk badly about any diet. It's just a simple fact. It's just a phenomena
Yeah.
where if you just do a 2-week study or a 4-week study, you might not be able to fully capture what we did by extending it out to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was the same endpoint. Once the like the fluid and diuresis or excess water excretion sort of leveled out, we saw 1.9 kilograms lost between the three groups to a T, no differences at week 6. So I hope that it kind of answers your question. I can
Oh
provide
yeah,
more details.
definitely. Real quick, I feel like that that kind of what's the word I'm looking for? So in a ketogenic diet, you kind of lose weight and overall body mass quickly
Mhm.
once you're fully adapted. And I can see how then that applies to like the psychology of like so many people saying like, "Oh, I love keto, like I lost weight." That's a cool phenomenon, which like I knew, but I like fully began to associate of why this diet kind of began to catch on in the masses
Mhm.
once you understand that. So just as an aside, I think that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just really quick. That's part of the reason why I joined this lab and wanted to do research in this area, because I didn't want to be ignorant to the research that is happening in nutritional sciences, and particularly with carbohydrate restriction fields, because in 2016, the ketogenic diet was hit the absolute max popularity in Google search trends. So if you go and you search ketogenic diets, 2016 was the relative 100% peak when people were most interested and invested in trying it.
I was right about it being our freshman year.
Yeah, exactly. Because in 2018, I believe it was ranked the second most popular diet in the US. And so
What the first was?
I can't remember. I made slides about it.
That's interesting. I wonder what it was. Like, that's just interesting.
No, I really forgot what it was. Yeah, I'm caught.
Oh, you're good. You're
I
good.
don't know. I'm gonna default to I'll talk about it later or a follow-up question.
Yeah.
But that's why I got into it when I was an undergrad. I mean, I didn't want to. There was no way that I was gonna be informed from just some Instagram infographic, which they're
Yeah.
cool, by the way. I mean, they're awesome, especially if they break down research. I don't want to downplay that, but in this fire hose of information about the ketogenic diet and what it entails, I wanted to get in the field just to understand more so the evidence-based science behind it. So I'm, like I said, so I can become less ignorant to what this lifestyle intervention entails. And
Mhm.
that was the main driver. And it's been super cool so far because we get to publish research like as such.
Yeah. That's to think that, like, as like a 19-year-old person, you were like had that kind of like insight, or just like the thought, like, I don't want to be an ignorant person. What were most of us doing at 19? Drinking, hitting the gym, playing Call of Duty. So
I still do those three
Oh
things.
yeah. Don't get me wrong. That's cool though, man.
Need some life balance.
Oh, for sure.
But
For sure.
no, absolutely. I would say I remember just being in the college dorm and seeing there was a EAS put a video where they had Dr. Volek as a guest lecturer, and Quest bars were also sponsoring some of the videos. You remember they always have a huge booth at the Arnold
Yeah.
every year, and um, they actually Quest Nutrition actually sponsored some of the prepared meals during the ROTC military study.
That's
So it's a
great.
really cool connection because when I went up to their booth, this is a funny story. Now I don't think a lot of people know this, but when I was an undergrad, I went up to their booth and I did not know that at the time before I started talking to him, but the one of the co-owners of the company, Ron Penna, I casually asked him if they looked into doing a study with Quest bars, and he said, "Do you know who Dr. Volek is?" And I said, "No, I don't have no clue what you're talking about." This was before I started in his
Oh,
lab,
okay.
and he was so shocked, his face dropped. Okay, and he actually put a word for me because I went in and I was such a clueless kid with this giant Ohio State Block O shirt, and he goes, "You're wearing a Block O shirt. You don't know who Dr. Volek is." And I felt, am I supposed to? But then I was so embarrassed, and that kind of launch padded me into just being part of Dr. Volek's lab just by being a little shitbag at the Quest Nutrition booth. I'm dead serious. This was uh, the pre-student days, and it just started almost just like a joke and an email. And here I am, like 5 years later, just doing the
Dude,
same research that I've been doing so far. So
that's life. That's just like that's funny.
stars aligned.
Yeah,
That's
man.
all I can say.
Dude. Ah, man, I want to ask you another question. This is gonna be a long one, guys. Thanks for sticking with us so far if you're still here. But this, I mean, this is Alex is honestly like one of the people that I can just like really ask questions to, and appreciate the conversation that comes along with it. So Alex and everyone listening, one of the assignments that we had through maybe it was Dr. Kennel at the time,
Mm-hmm.
was the Arnold assignment in that undergrad class. Well, I guess it wasn't quite an undergrad class, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
what and in that assignment, basically, you went to the Arnold, which a bus ride away if you're at Ohio State, and you talked to whatever supplement company you wanted to, and you saw what claims they were making. You kind of like evaluated it against current research. Very fun project. And it's still saved on the desktop of my computer just because like that was probably one of my favorite assignments. And I want to save it. I don't know. I'm sentimental like that. What did
If
you
I
do?
remember well, I think you wrote it on creatine, didn't you?
So that was actually when I met my man Stefan from Creapure, and he hooked me up and like he's treated me really well. And I've honestly like I love working with Creapure. They fucking fly me places, pay me well, pay for everything. I really am so glad. You know, one of those things where once again you meet someone at the Arnold and it
Mm-hmm.
changes your life a little bit. I still talk to Stefan, and maybe in the future, once these expos start happening again, he'll have me do a couple more. But
That's
yeah,
awesome, man.
actually,
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to clown on one of our classmates because I knew she was going to be at a certain booth, and I went up to that booth and just like acted like I didn't know who she was, and that she was in our class. And I asked questions like, "Hey, so I'm doing this assignment. I'm a student at Ohio State," and I was just like, "Yeah, I saw this brand, and I thought it was pretty." So I was kind of being a jerk.
Just plain dumb.
Yeah, to clown on someone. Yeah, but I did connect with Creapure at that Arnold. But what did you do your assignment on?
Oh, I mean, I did it. It's funny because I did it on an exogenous ketone supplement, and I did it
No
on
shit.
ketone salts. I did it on MCT oil
Okay.
because because that again, an MCT oil is again a form of an exogenous or a BHB increasing agent. It's not very robust and it's pretty calorie dense. I mean, we're talking about taking 9 or 10 grams that translate to roughly 100 kcals per serving. So um, it was again it was kind of emerging and people were kind of learning why a medium chain fatty acid was different than a long chain fatty acid contained in the food matrix.
Mhm.
And I mean, in brief, it's just it doesn't require the same transporters as long chain fatty acid transporters, and once it hits your portal vein and it passes through your liver, it's metabolized very fast into beta hydroxybutyrate, but the actual clearance tends to make it subside about an hour or two after you consume it. Depends on the quantity that you consume. And it was being put on a pedestal because of the studies that were trying to test this in a cycling setting
Hmm.
where they would just give cyclists either a placebo or a glucose oral rinsing solution. So I know this is a lot of Asker Jokendrup's expertise on cycling and mouth rinses with glucose oral solutions, which is fantastic. I mean, it's great. He was one of the first ones to show that just swishing glucose around in your mouth and to have an ergogenic effect. So
Pretty
that's
wild.
a pretty incredible finding. And it's I think it was sometimes in 2004 when he published the results. I could be wrong, but anyway, he again testing unique supplements in very specific settings. They were testing MCT oils, and it seemed the hypothesis was that when you're using a fuel that does not rely on carbohydrate or uh, glycogen breakdown, you can actually blunt glycogen breakdown by taking something else while cycling. So it's expected that if you take MCT, you're able to induce this glycogen sparing action, which might help you later in the race.
Yeah.
Well, so what was found out was that while MCT might, and I'm emphasis on might, have a glycogen sparing effect because it depends on the VO2 max at which you're exercising, right? The problem was GI distress.
Hmm.
So how can you reconcile something that has a glycogen sparing glucose has a glycogen sparing effect? I mean, it's just because you're providing it exogenously. So
Yeah.
it depends on what type of athlete you are, because if you're somewhere sub 60 or 70 VO2 max, you're really hitting a very peak aerobic range, right? But if you're in a dead sprint, right, like those velodrome cyclists, and you're at 90% VO2 max and your heart rate is about 180, I mean, there's not much you can do about glycogen sparing there. It's just ATP, PCR, then you go in anaerobic glycolysis, and then I don't know what supplements you can take in there, but you're just, like I said, depends on the sprinter or depends on the athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a problem that occurred with these supplements. Sometimes they're not well tolerated, and that's something that has nothing to do per se with um, publishing 100 peer reviews saying, look what positive effect this supplement has. Nobody's going to take it if they feel ill on a bike, or they can't perform, or they have to rush to the bathroom. I mean, imagine you're in the Tour de France and somebody hands you an MCT infused drink, right? And all of a sudden it just, you're up in a hill climb, and instead of focusing on what gear to shift in, you got to look for a porta potty, to put it elegantly. So that was the main takeaway of what I wrote about the supplement.
Yeah.
And
Cool.
this is something that people should not often overlook. Like ketone salts, for example, not every ketone salt mixes very well in water solutions. So especially, this is just pure chemistry. I mean, you want to, you increase the solution rate or dissolution rate by increasing the temperature of the water that you drink. But nobody's gonna make a ketone salt tea. You want it in like cold, crisp water.
Yeah.
But just have to understand that it's not gonna dissolve as well as lowering the temperature.
Mm.
And so, like creatine, for example,
Yeah.
like I wrote an entire article on creatine, just discussing how creatine research started and to be tested in warm tea or hot tea, because it dissolved better than in cold water, and you didn't have that gritty taste because all the creatine particles dissolved. But over the years, people are trying to come out with more and more creatine supplements, right? Like they're trying to make it more ionic in solution, like
Yeah.
creatine HCl.
Yeah.
But if anybody tried creatine HCl, it's like taking a shot of bleach to the dome. It's it is so. Am I wrong? Have you ever tried it?
Dude, yeah. You're not wrong.
I mean, I remember, this is kind of a funny story. So like that article there, it's an article I wrote. I know you can't see it, but to anybody that's curious, Catalyst Athletic Magazine has a performance nutrition magazine that they write for Olympic weightlifting.
Hmm.
And Rich LaFountain told me, or asked me if I wanted to be part of writing an entire section on creatine supplementation. I was like, heck yeah, absolutely. It was a break from what we were doing with ketogenic diets, right? And I was, it's like, absolutely, I want to do it because creatine HCl was getting big. And naturally, what happened with this paper, to try to put something like peer reviewed and reviewed out there, I did the same thing with just trying to show that there's no difference between these like
Yeah.
creatine moieties.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
So I was in the paper, I demonstrated, or I showed uh, through the literature review that we did, that there's no difference in the end result of creatine saturation in the muscle, whether you take creatine monohydrate or hydrochloride.
Right.
What is different though is just the way that they dissolve in solution. So there's a greater probability that creatine HCl will dissolve in lower temperature beverages. However, it tends to also depend on the acidity of the beverage too.
Right.
So if you squeeze a lemon, for example, in tea, you improve the solubility, and therefore you can just dissolve creatine monohydrate no problem. And it's way cheaper than hydrochloride too,
Yeah.
which is another huge thing, right? I mean, bulk supplements gave me a 5 pound bag of creatine for $12. The creatine labs or whatever HCl formula, that's a little jar. It looks like a little jar of makeup. It's $30.
Yeah.
I'm not paying that.
Right.
Screw that. not even, it's not even for what, dissolving better in cold water. I drink it in tea anyways before I go to bed. So
Yeah.
like, why do it? You
Yeah.
agree?
Oh, 100%. One question I have for you, because I thought of this a while back, but what about creatine and its like dissolution in um, liquids that have like a little bit of fat? Um, because like lipids can have an effect on solubility of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to think like why I even. Oh, what happened was um, one thing I've found is like Creapure creatine in particular, it doesn't dissolve as well. And I think that's
Hmm.
actually like not a bad thing. I think it's because their claim, and I would argue that there is science to back this up. I could find the
Mm-hmm.
specific articles that like they do make a slightly superior creatine product with less waste products and that type of shit. But yeah, I tried it in like a shake once that I made with 2% milk, and I don't know what it was, but like it tasted so much less gritty. Could have just been something
Mm-hmm.
totally confounding, or maybe it was like the lipid of the milk. I don't know.
Yeah, I never thought about milk because I was thinking, how do you suspend fat in a polar solution? So obviously, like, yeah, the I I can't speak about what effect changing the fat percentage of the liquid that you're trying to
Mm,
dissolve it
yeah,
in. I would argue that you're not gonna really see big incorporation into the fat matrix just because I'm like I
gotcha.
said, creatine in itself, the creatine molecule is also an osmolyte. So I
Hmm.
mean its polar nature is likely to not interact with the non-polar behavior of fatty
Uh,
acids.
huh.
So
Okay.
this is just buried in
Yeah.
speculation,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But what I would say is, and you brought up a good point about the confounder. So temperature is the biggest confounder here.
Mm.
And the second one is pH of the solution. So that's why I said if you want to look at the peak solubility of a creatine monohydrate, um, let's
Ah.
say
Yeah.
dose,
Yeah.
it's a warm cup of tea with a or cup of water. It doesn't have to. Tea just masks any because just taking creatine, it doesn't inherently have a taste, but it's
Right.
better to have something associated with it that will just make you more lenient to drink it.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, like I said, temperature and pH. So research has just been testing this and hot tea, and you lower the pH by using lemons. So just
Mm.
keeping it simple.
Yeah. Definitely. I wanna get a couple. I don't want to keep you too long, man. I know we're
No,
going
go
on
ahead.
long, but one thing I saw that after we talked about these MCTs, I saw that you employ, well, not you, but like in the study, I
Hmm.
believe 10 grams, if I'm not incorrect, was used. Was it both the ketogenic diet and the ketogenic diet with ketone salts? So was that just to kind of like enhance the amount of fat and overall like beta hydroxybutyrate?
Yeah, I would say we were actually trying to mimic it more so how people might lean towards formulating a diet for themselves at home. I
Hmm.
mean, clearly
Yeah.
those so those 10 grams of MCT were that's a great question, by the way. And those 10 grams of MCT were calculated in the total fat provided by the diet. So typically you don't necessarily have to add MCT. You can just, I mean, 10 grams of fat if you need to fit it in your macronutrients total for the day can be added from virtually anything. So in that case, it could have been a trade-off with like olive oil or anything else that was isocaloric to MCT. But I think the rationale for why we use that was just because we were predicting what people might be likely to do if they did it on their own in
Yeah.
their own setting or in their own on their own diet prep or meal prep when looking at a ketogenic diet. And it was an easy addition of fat. I
Yeah.
mean, it is nothing but a medium chain, like an 8 to 10 carbon chain of a fat that just adds to the total of calories and is likely to be metabolized as beta hydroxybutyrate.
Hmm.
And we didn't, I mean, when we measured them or when we reported things in the lab, they were fasted. So I just want to mention that the exposure to an MCT dose and the beta hydroxybutyrate that follows after ingestion is not robust enough to carry over and influence our results
Mm.
even 2 to 3 hours after, let alone an overnight fast. And
Yeah,
the same goes for ketone salts.
gotcha.
They're acute BHB supplementation.
Yeah,
So,
and that's kind of just like the whole thing of like causation versus correlation. Like, yeah, like in the very short term, you might see that increase in BHB, and that's maybe where they can like say, oh, there's science to say this increases your BHB. So,
mhm,
but it's not causation to say that that is what causes that the ketone salts are what causes and
mhm.
drives the weight loss. So yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
and that's exactly why we did this study,
yeah.
because we manipulated this so carefully, like I said, to the point one of a gram when it came to food. We controlled, they were not allowed even to salt or season their food unless it had
Mm.
no sodium attached to it. We monitored like water intake. I mean, like I said, we're close to 200 variables that we collected in this study. And what we published with the body composition paper, that is a blip. That is just a very
Oh yeah, yeah,
tiny slice of
yeah,
the pie with
yeah,
the paper that we were discussing, right? Um, and yeah, there's many more to come out of the study. And I
yeah.
think my next project will be concerned with the effects of the diet and also the inclusion of ketone salts on circulating ketone and glucose concentrations, because these uh, participants were tasked to measure their ketones and glucose almost every hour on testing days for about 13 hours. So I
Okay.
have a lot of data points. And
Yeah.
the question that you asked me about MCT and ketone salts and everything else, it's it's gonna be taken into account to see what area under the curves they had on each diet. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely more to come in the near future
Oh
in
yeah.
terms of publications. So I don't want to, like I said, I can talk about anything, but I think we can keep things interesting and probably leave it for even another discussion in the future
Right.
if more findings come out of this study. So, um, but
Definitely.
yeah, that's kind of what I had to say about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, like you said, I feel like there definitely will be future discussions. Hopefully, I can get you on the podcast to in a couple months or a couple. I mean, however long it takes, I really don't know. But to
Anytime.
discuss, yeah, to discuss those future findings and future papers that will be published. But real quick, I'm just interested to hear before we stop. Like,
Hmm.
what's the goal with the PhD and your future education and plans thereafter?
Yeah. So the goal is to use the publications that come out of this study and sort of leverage my position into more of the grant writing scene,
Hmm.
because I think there's more to find out about not just ketone salts alone. I mean, we're running into more and more ketone forms. So you have esters now, you can have diesters. So there's a lot of these agents that there hasn't been a lot of research that's been published on. So I think I'm gonna keep the same exploratory tone and neutral. Um,
Hmm.
it's not a bias, because you shouldn't go with a preconceived bias in a study like this, but this neutral hypothesis testing of seeing what they actually do, because that's the primary question. And then maybe just work on projects where we would see different populations. So we have some projects where we might be tracking BHB and how it goes in the body, where it goes, if it's to the brain, the heart, the muscle,
Yeah.
the organs. And these kind of tracer studies are very cool because it brings in question what metabolically active tissue loves beta hydroxybutyrate. And so far, we know a lot about the brain and the heart, but
Hmm.
we don't know as much about the muscle and other organs and how it kind of BHB acts peripherally. So
Yeah.
for future like PhD work, that's another, I would say 3 or 4 years. I would say that my dissertation, I would like to focus on more of this detailed analysis on what effects beta hydroxybutyrate has as a metabolite, and keep hypothesis testing, and use these sort of randomized control and balanced trials between carbohydrate restriction or fat restriction, and sort of see what hits. I mean, in essence, it's kind of like Battleship, right? I'm not a tenure track PhD professor that has had hundreds of publications where I know what hypothesis I'm going to test.
Hmm.
So as part of Dr. Volick's grant writing and projects, I try to grasp on whatever I can to publish in something that's, I wouldn't say marketable, but right now, just this study alone has been marketed very well. So, like, you're contributing to my exposure and to our lab exposure. So, we're all very grateful of how it was received and in pop culture so far.
Yeah.
So, that's what I'm looking forward in the PhD, just positive interactions and harboring good discussion. So, um, huge non-academic goals. It's just the connections that I make.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it, man. And I feel like if all of your grinding and dedication, hard work throughout the time I've known you and before are an indicator, it's definitely going to happen, man. So I'm really looking forward to seeing your success and to seeing just the overall work that you contribute toward this literature and scientific body that we have. It's cool stuff, and it's really cool to be able to talk to you about it. So I appreciate it, man.
No, likewise. Thanks for the positive feedback. So I hope your channel grows and you get continuous exposure in the field. I know the field of nutrition and training is a very opinionated field, and to make it on top, it definitely requires some sort of a talent or unique skill set. But so far, the way that I'm seeing the channel grow and the podcast grow, I think we're gonna see an upwards trend. So best of luck ahead.
I appreciate that, man. Well, everybody, thank you all for sticking with us. If you made it to this point, it's been one of the longer episodes, but I really enjoyed the conversation and I hope you all got a lot out of it. So if you want to go check out the study and read it for yourself, it has been very well received, as Alex said. So I'm going to link that in the description of the YouTube video or the podcast. You can just go ahead and give that a Google and it'll pop up. Um, but if there's Alex, real quick, if there's anything else you want to like plug out there or any other ways that you want to support what you're doing, what the lab's doing, feel free to go for it, man.
Yeah, I besides the study, I mean, I thank you everybody if you're gonna go and check it out. I appreciate it in anticipation of the future interactions, even if it stems from this podcast. So the how I should say the viewership and the exposure really and truly helps. And we have a website too. I mean, we can show what the team is doing. It's lowcarb.osu.edu, and it talks about our team's mission statements and future projects. And you can find me on ResearchGate and follow what the research our lab group is publishing or what other authorships and co-authorships that we've been on or past research. And overall, yeah, I'm not big on social media, but I do run a private Instagram account, which I have no problem sharing and interacting with people if they listen to this podcast. So feel free. I'm not a stranger. I love a good conversation. So, and this has been one of them. So I appreciate it.
Awesome. Yeah, guys, really appreciate if you go support all the things Alex just mentioned. I'll link everything down in the description of the video or the podcast. Also, if you wouldn't mind, if you're watching on YouTube, really helps me out to like the video, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share it around, leave a comment if you think our matching outfits were the move. I think it turned out. Yeah, look at it. Turned out well. If
We
you're
didn't talk about it.
we did it. If you're listening on Apple, I always appreciate a positive review. And on Spotify, you can't really review me, but share it around. It always helps. Thank you all for checking out episode 33 of the Trainer Scoop podcast. Catch you in the next one.